It's 8:59, so Dr. Parker's probably going to be a little bit late. So now you're all in trouble because I'm the vice chair, assuming the chair position. Looks like everybody's here.
You can see that well?
Sure. Well, let me call this to order, and then you can make that announcement, Barbara. Okay, so I'm going to call to order the February 15th, day after Valentine's Day, 364 days before I have to worry about that again. Mobile Source Committee meeting here in room CC8 at SCAQMD, and our esteemed counsel, Barbara Barrett, is going to make a brief announcement.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to remind you, for those who know, and let you know if you're new at this committee, we have a procedure for requesting the opportunity to speak. There are cards at the back table in the back of the room, and you turn in the card to a staff member at the table here, and they'll present it to the governing board members, and your name will be called when it's time to comment on the items that you requested to comment on. And also, you can fill out a card if you have general public comment on an item not on the agenda, and that comment comes at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so item number 1 is an action item on the annual report on AB 2766 funds from the mobile vehicle registration fees. Carol Gomez, being the only person in the world who understands this program, is going to present it for us.
May I say real quickly, CC7, there are some overflow seats if anybody wants to sit in there and then come back for an item later on the agenda. And we're also trying to get a few more chairs, but I want everybody to be comfortable. Thank you, sorry.
All right, good morning. So as Board Member Lou said, I'm going to give an overview of the 2766 program. The purpose of this report is to review how much monies came in, what the monies were used for, and what the outcome is. We do provide a copy of this report to all the local governments and to interested stakeholders. 2766, just some background, was adopted in 1990. 40% of $4 of the DMV registration funds is savinged out to 162 local governments. They then use the monies for mobile emission reduction projects. They have to submit a report to us each year on how they're using those, and then we give a summary of that to your board, and then we submit that to ARP. The next 3 slides are photos of the most popular items the funds are used for. This one right here, alt fuels, electric vehicles. This is from Santa Clarita. This is infrastructure they put in using these funds at their Metrolink station. Transportation demand management, TDM, rideshare programs. This is very popular use of the funds. The picture on the left for Foothill Transit, many cities that are in that area, such as Azusa, Monrovia, they provide subsidies to their employees to take transit to work. On the right is the city of Glendora. Many of the cities also use the monies to subsidize their employees or to encourage them to use different alternative modes of transportation. For Glendora, they have 53 employees who are in their program. The PM reduction, that's mainly for street paving and street sweepers, the City of Laverne's street sweepers on the right. Bike usage, on the left is a photo of the City of Diamond Bar's Bike to Work Day event. Board Member Cacchiotti also participated in that. The other 2 pictures are the City of Long Beach. Long Beach has a lot. They're well known for their bike facilities. We had a really good meeting this year with Michelle Mowry. She's the mobility officer from the Department of Public Works, and her staff. The reason we went out and met with them is they had $3.6 million in their account that they didn't have pre-designated towards any projects. It was just sitting there. So we went out to meet with them on that, and it turned out with the City of Long Beach, and this actually isn't an uncommon situation, the staff was all new, and they didn't know they had that amount of money sitting there. So, so besides letting them know it was there, we had a really good conversation on different kinds of projects they could spend the monies on. So now from this report, you'll see that 3 million of it is now designated towards specific projects, which is what we want. Transportation management or traffic management, this is basically signal synchronization projects. These pictures right here are from the City of LA's Automated Traffic Surveillance and Control Center. This is really an amazing program right here. This synchronizes over 4,700 intersections, controlling 7.4 million miles of city streets. They have 25,000 vehicle detectors and over 650 cameras. And I'm going to talk more about this specific program in a few slides. Okay, so the money comes in from the DMV. We subpoena it out to the local governments. They decide what kind of projects they'd like to spend their funds on. They submit their annual data to us. We put this report together. It goes to you guys, then it goes to CARB. And then every 2 years, there's an audit of the local governments to make sure they're spending their monies how they told us they were and that it's being spent correctly. As an overview summary, there's 162 cities, I mentioned that before. There's almost 23 million came into the program this year, and they spent almost 18 million of it. It resulted in 359 projects, of which 220 had emission reductions tied to them for 134 tons. And then we have the breakdown by emission category below that. This slide shows over the last 5 years what the emissions history is, or the funding history is, I should say. The third column for motor vehicle fees received at 22.6 million. You can see that every year it goes up slightly. The next one for project spending, the 17.8 million. It's a little bit less than last year, but even though it's less, if you look at the second to the last column, the pre-designated funds with the 49.3, staff spent a big effort this year in getting the local governments to really think and to plan on how they were going to spend the monies that were in their funds versus just having it sit there and not do anything. So because of that, the funds remaining is the lowest it's ever been. And frankly, we're kind of proud of that. Okay, so this financial summary slide just shows it based on county breakdown. And again, that 49.3 pre-designated reflects 85% of the monies that were unspent. And again, that's pretty high. This chart shows all the categories they can spend their funds on, with the three top being the alternative fuels, electric vehicles, transportation demand management, and traffic management. Of the almost 18 million that was spent, 12 million was in those three categories. This slide and the next slide show the different categories they could spend their funds on and the emission reductions for each, and it's listed by highest emission reductions to lowest. The top one, transportation demand management, that one was 56% of the emissions that were reduced. And so this slide just continues it on. The two bottom categories, land use, public education, while those are allowable categories, it's really pretty much impossible to measure emission reductions for those. So those are why those are at 0. And again, that equated to 134 tons. Okay, so this is the most interesting slide. So let me get right to it. See the emission reductions. For the prior year, it was almost 6,200 pounds reduced. Now it's 134 pounds, or tons, I should say, not pounds, tons. So the reason for this is in our previous reports that we've been doing for years, we always called out one particular project, the City of LA's SCAQMD program, which had by far the majority of the emission reductions. We internally as staff, they were using this method that was separate from any methods anybody else uses, called this wind-free method, which had been approved by CARB. And so we kind of questioned it, but because it was approved by CARB and because AB 2766 is not a SIP-approved program, we just kind of let them do it that way. But last year at this committee, the committee asked us to work with the city of LA and look at this methodology in detail and see, just evaluate it. So we did that. And before I get into our results, for a little bit more on this ADSAC program, they originally developed it for the 1984 Olympics. And then in the 2000-2001 fiscal year, they used 2766 funds to update it. And at that time, that's when they went to CARB and said, can we use this Winfrey method to do our emission reductions? And CARB said, okay. So this Winfrey method was accounting for 90% of our emission reductions, which again, in our previous reports, we always kind of called that out, that they were doing that. So, various planning staff from 3 different units, we had numerous conference calls, meetings with the city, went out there, and we all ended up, at the end of the day, coming into agreement on a new methodology for them to do their emission reductions. So the new methodology uses updated emission factors. It also uses the latest road segment lengths and real-time speed and traffic volumes. So when you look at that, plus that fact that cars are cleaner now, the emissions were greatly reduced. Now, the good news, though, is that as staff, we feel very comfortable that this is a more accurate accounting of their emission reductions. Okay, so to move on, for the subvention program, we're using 40% of the $4 of DMV registration funds. MSRC gets 30% of that $4. So we encourage the local governments to leverage those funds together to be able to use it for even bigger projects. So, and then in addition to that, we work with the COGS, on doing region-wide projects. So like next month, for example, I'll be out at the Western Riverside COG giving them a presentation. Many of the local governments that are within, particularly these 3 COGs, CVAG, Western Riverside, Gateway, they give a portion, if not all, of their monies that they get to these COGs for them to use it for regional programs.
I might just interrupt, as chair of the MSRC, the local government partnership program was very successful this year, and we're working on we're hopefully a 3-year program where we can help implement some of the things that are needed for the AQMP. So.
Yep, ditto that. Okay, so for program outreach, every single day we're on the phone, emails with local governments, talking to them about their projects, letting them know whether or not it's an approvable use of the funds, how they go about doing their emission calculations. So we do that all the time. Like I mentioned, we brief COGS. We conduct training sessions every year, about 12, where we're reviewing with them the different project categories and then how they input their data into our reporting tools. In 2 weeks, we'll be out in Coachella Valley doing a training out there, and then next month in March, we'll be holding a series of the classes here. For a work in progress, we have a resource guide that goes along with this program, and we continually have to update it because technologies change, new things come out. So we have in there examples of good projects, and then also projects that are allowable, but also projects that wouldn't be allowable, and we go into a little bit more detail on those things. And recently, collaborating with CARB has been a big issue for us because CARB is in a position where all of their staff that had ever worked on the 2766 program have retired. So CARB's responsible for updating the reporting tools. And this year, having them do that was a little challenging. So we're working with them to have the authority for the administration of these reporting tools come to us instead. And CARB's very supportive of that, so right now we're just working out the details.
Does CARB support this new tool you're using to analyze the reductions that's different from wind-free?
Yes, yeah, they do.
And are those discussions including FTE and other resources?
Not FTE. So as far as, so now we'll be taking this report to the board in March, and then with your approval, we'll then forward it on to CARB. And then after that's when we release it out to the local governments. So, any questions?
Yeah, let's, we don't have any comment cards on this item from the public, but if any of the board members have any other questions or comments?
I just want to clarify that a local government can accumulate these funds,
Oh, yes,
and so they can stack them up to get a bigger project.
right. They can accumulate them. There is no requirement that they spend it within a certain time frame. So we don't have any issue with that. We just want to make sure that they're planning on what they're going to spend it on in the future. And then if they're saving the monies up so that they can then do that, that's fine.
And they can leverage those funds through matches from the MSRC if it fits within our program.
Because they are required to do matching funds, right?
With some of the
With
MSRC
some of it,
programs,
yeah.
but not with this
Not
one.
with this one, okay.
Yeah, some of these cities receive enough for maybe a third of a Prius or a Chevy
Right.
Bolt or something a year.
Yeah,
So you have to wait 3 years before you can actually afford a vehicle or something.
yeah.
So with regard to the traffic management recalculation,
Mm-hmm.
it went from something like 13 cents a pound of emission reductions to $8.41, but it's still the most cost-effective one that we have, right, in terms of the different categories,
Let me see.
I think.
It may be.
I think it was easily, like the other ones were at $20 or
Yeah.
more.
There was a project, I'm looking for where that slide was, that was $8 and something.
Yeah, that was traffic management.
That was traffic, okay, then yes, then it is.
And given that our calculations for the cost effectiveness were off on that, are we confident about the other categories? That we're
Yes.
quantifying them all correctly?
Yeah, we are confident on the others.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
and Signal Sync in general, the way the software reporting tool worked, we didn't have any issues with that. It was just this separate wind-free method that we had.
Yeah.
The questions.
okay, so we need a motion? Second?
Second.
Any objections? Okay.
Thank you.
Carol, appreciate it. Now we have an item that's going to take a little bit longer, Sarah. And, hi, folks, we have an overflow room if there's need for more seats in CC.
She said there's also, they set up the auditorium, and
Oh, the
apparently
auditorium,
a
too.
lot of the folks with
So we have a lot of,
cards
we've got a lot
will be
of
there.
folks from Sierra Club and CCAJ who want to comment. We have 20 people, and we have until, what, 10:30, right? We'll need 5 minutes. We need to get- Well, we actually probably give everyone 2 minutes, and that would be okay. All right, okay. So
It would
expect,
be helpful if you could say who the first 3 or 4 are, so that they know as the presentation are wrapping up, if they're in the auditorium, they can come, and then we'll keep telling them.
Yeah,
when
we'll
they're coming,
do
so
that.
they have time to transfer.
yeah, we can do that. So the first 3 commenters, but we're gonna go through the staff presentation, maybe some comments from the board members and questions, and then go to public comment. And you can expect to have 2 minutes for your public comments. The first 3 people we have registered are Juan Delgado, Sean Martinez, and Laura Schultz. So when we're done with that and ready to take public comment, please be here and ready to go so we don't have any slowdowns. If Paul can reset that from 3 minutes to 2, we would be all good to go. So Sarah, what do you have to tell us?
Okay, all right, so good morning, I'm Sarah Reese, I'm the ADEO for planning here at the district, and I'm just going to give an update on what we've been doing on facility-based measures for the last, since I last updated the board in September. So just a quick recap of where what the board direction was. We have 5 facility-based measures that we're looking at: airports, ports, new and redevelopment, warehouses, and rail yards. And I have them here in the order of more voluntary approaches that we're pursuing with airports and ports to more regulatory approaches. We are pursuing indirect source rules with warehouses and rail yards. We are looking at some regulatory options for new and redevelopment, as well as investigating what the costs and impacts of those would be. So now I'm going to go into each of these sectors in more detail. For airports, we're working with them to negotiate a memorandum of understanding to get emission reductions. The airports right now are in the process of developing their air quality improvement plans. So the MOU will basically incorporate measures or features of those air quality improvement plans, and those will be the emission reduction targets that we'll get from that. We've had some very productive discussions with the airports in developing those MOUs, and we'll effectively have individual MOUs with each of the 5 airports that we're covering. Right now, airports, as I mentioned, are busy developing their air quality improvement plans, also developing their emission inventories so that we have a good baseline and then we know what our starting point is.
What are the 5 airports?
So it's the LA, Long Beach, Ontario,
Burbank in
Bur-
Orange County.
yes.
Burbank in Orange County.
So in terms of where we're going on next steps, again, the airports are developing their plan in place, and so the concept here is that the memorandum of understanding with the ports would incorporate specific measures from the Clean Air Action Plan, and those would be where we get our emission reductions. We have high-level agreement with the ports in terms of proceeding with an MOU. We're still going back and forth on what those specifics would look like. So what particular parts of the cap, what particular measures within the Clean Air Action Plan we would include within the MOU. We have launched a technical working group. The purpose of that group is it's a smaller group really to get into the weeds of what the emissions are, how we quantify emissions. The hope is that coming out of that work, we'll have a better understanding of, or that'll help inform specific measures that we would put in the MOU. So that would make me, for example, give us an idea of, for the different elements of the cap, how much emission reduction we can expect from each of them. So we're proceeding with that work. Right now, with our technical working group, we have bi-weekly meetings that are planned. We've just kicked those off. They'll continue for the next several months. We'll also have main working groups, which will be broader, where other folks can weigh in, understand what we're working on, and get an opportunity to comment and work with us on that. And again, we're expecting to adopt an MOU. We'll have the board adopt an MOU by November of this year. So this is a project that's related to facility-based measures. Just wanted to touch on it. This is the work that we're doing in the Pacific Rim to see if we can have a collaborative approach with different ports to get an incentive program together to attract cleaner vessels to call at our ports. Vessels are very important. They'll be our most significant source of NOx in the basin in the near future. And it's difficult for us to reduce emissions from vessels because we don't have regulatory authority over the engine standards, and those are internationally controlled. So we've been having discussions in China over the last several months to see if there's interest in working with us, and then with particular interest, there are other specific measures that we can take. So we call this our primer is the nickname for this. As I mentioned, we've been visiting folks in China. We were there in August of this past year, and then also most recently in January, meeting with folks in Hong Kong, in Shanghai. We also most recently met with folks in Shenzhen. These are all major ports in Asia, and they a lot of the vessels that call at those ports also call at our ports. So far, there's been definite interest, I think, in the concept and interest in working with us. I think there's the interest will increase as we have more meat on the bones of whatever this looks like, and so we're busy doing some technical analysis to support that. In parallel, we've been working with shipping lines and also engine manufacturers to work on a technology demonstration project. And so we have a project going right now with MAN, which is a major manufacturer of shipping engines, as well as a CMA CGM, which is a big shipping line, to get a project that we think it has pretty good merits in terms of getting about a 40% emission reductions in NOx from these engines. So we're pretty excited about this work, and we'll be updating you as we get more developments. For new development and redevelopment, we are continuing to meet with the working group and develop or explore regulatory concepts. We are definitely heeding the direction that we received as we go through this, evaluate the economic impacts, potential impacts of the real estate market, and other impacts that would be associated with that. We're discussing these concepts, and we will be issuing an RFP to do some work to evaluate more of what those economic impacts would look like.
Working group meets regularly?
We've had several meetings of the working group. The last one was probably early January. So we've been this work is taking probably a slower tack than some of the other facility-based measures that we have. But yeah, we at this point want to be able to develop an RFP, run that through our working group, and then issue that so that we can start doing some of the work to explore what potential economic impacts would look like.
Any members of the working group from the housing industry?
Yes. We have a pretty broad stakeholder membership for that working group. So, yeah, as I mentioned, our next steps is to issue a draft working group to the RFP to the working group, and then continue our discussions with them. So one idea we did have and we have run this a little bit through the working group, is this concept of a CEQA air quality mitigation fund that we would do on a voluntary basis. So new development, redevelopment projects, they could voluntarily contribute to this fund. We would then use that fund to implement emission reduction projects that could offset projects' particular impacts. So that's one idea that we're exploring, and we'll continue to run that through our working group. On warehouses, we're looking at indirect source rules, so we're getting into the more regulatory components here. We've been evaluating with the working group both what the structure of a proposed rule would look like, as well as what the stringency of that rule could look like. So I think we've been through this committee before where we talked about the menu of different options for indirect source rules. And so we have a number of them here. In terms of the stringency, we have an RFP that we've already issued, and work has started on that to look at economic impacts that could result from different regulatory scenarios that we would pursue. So that work is underway right now and will be completed later this year. So we've been doing a lot of work that get better understanding the issues associated with warehouses, and in particular understanding the different business models that are out there. So we're definitely hearing very strongly from the community, the need for, or the impacts associated with trucks and warehouses, and the need to have strong controls and to reduce those emissions. But at the same time, we struggle with constraints, with the different constraints in the industry. We found out that the predominant business model isn't one in which the warehouses have control over the trucks. So that makes it a little difficult for us to then evaluate what we're going to do. You could put a very strong rule in place, but if the warehouses, as a practical matter, have a difficult time complying with that, that's probably not going to be a very successful rule. So the predominant business model, actually, as I mentioned, it's not the one where the warehouse owner owns the fleet, the trucking fleet. A lot of times what we find is that the warehouses have very little control over the trucks, that it's, they contract with the cargo owner, although the fleets are contracted by the cargo owner, so it's not this direct warehouse trucking relationship. So there's all kinds of business models out there, and one of the things we're very conscious of is we don't want to have a regulation in place that you could just then disrupt the industry, change a business model, and get out from under regulation, whereas then some people might be covered by that. That seems a little inequitable. So we're looking at still at different ISR options that might not necessarily rely on direct control by the warehouses of trucks. It's not that we're taking anything necessarily off the table, but we kind of recognizing as we're learning more about the different business models, what options could work a little better than others. So one idea we did have in that mix was the idea of a fleet crediting program. It's something that could be pretty complicated and have a lot of administrative burden associated with it, but it's basically that, particular fleets, the warehouses are an obligation for different credit amounts, and then particular fleets, if they're cleaner, could have credits associated with them, and then they would be a little bit like a cap and trade program along those lines. It is pretty complicated, and it's not an idea that we're wedded to, but it's something that we're exploring as a way to get emission reductions, but get around this issue of the fact that a lot of the warehouses don't have control over their trucking fleets. There are, of course, other things going on that affect heavy-duty vehicles and can get emission reductions, both at the national level within California, and then also some projects that are happening throughout the world that might be of interest. These are, some of them will help get turnover of the existing fleet, which is a big issue for us. Some of them not so much. So one thing I just want to highlight is EPA is working on its what they call their Cleaner Truck Initiative. So this is the update for the heavy-duty NOx standard, which they haven't touched in about 19 years. We're hopeful that that rulemaking will yield fruit, but it's not going to result in any short-term emission reductions. On rail, we're having some, I think, productive conversations with the rail yards, again, exploring indirect source rules for that. Right now, the rail yards have been cooperating with us, and we're in discussions to get better emission inventory from the rail yards, because that's really important so that we can establish a good baseline of what the emissions are. We've also visited all 4 of the rail yards that are in our area to get a better understanding of their business models and the different operational constraints at the facilities. Just want to touch on the fact that there is a little bit of overlap with AB 617 and facility-based measures. At all of our community meetings that we've had, there's been a great amount of interest in reducing emissions from trucks and recognizing that there's a lot of impacts associated with that. Warehouses, rail yards, and ports are all located in what we call our Year 1 AB 617 communities, so there's just a great deal of interest. And where this could play is in the community emission reduction plans. There's a potential role for facility-based measures there. So just wanted to roll that out there as something that's been mentioned and is of interest. So just kind of, again, an overview of where we're at, working with the airports and the ports on developing MOUs, and we'll hopefully have something in place this November. Continuing to explore options on new development and redevelopment, and then working on regulatory options on the warehouses and rail yards for new development, redevelopment, and also for the warehouses, still exploring what those economic impacts would be, and hopefully have some results that we'll be able to share later this year. So that is that.
Okay, are there any questions before we go to public comment?
Just, if I might, I know you sent out a survey to 400 warehouses and so on. Are you recommending that whatever we adopt would regulate all warehouses or just a few warehouses?
So there's options that we could investigate, and that's one of the ways we could cut things down is by either warehouse size or by the cargo volume. Usually just because a warehouse is big doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that we should target. They could be very efficient operations or newer operations, so there's some nuances with that, but it is one of the topics of consideration within the working group.
I understand there are 38 high-cube warehouses, or where are they located?
Most of the warehouses in the Inland Empire, so farther east from here.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
On the negotiations we're working with China on, have we calculated the expected reductions that we think we might get from a program like that?
Yeah, we haven't calculated that out yet, but again, knowing that the emissions from vessels are very significant, if we can get some between either retrofits or getting Tier 3 vessels on those routes, we expect that there would be pretty substantial emission reductions. We do think that there's retrofit technology out there that could get us fairly inexpensive and still get us a 40% reduction in NOx. There's a pretty big delta between the types of vessels that are currently on these routes and what a Tier 3 vessel is capable of achieving. So we think there's a lot of opportunity to work there. A lot of it depends on cooperation from the shipping lines, and if we can get ships to actually, or make the program attractive enough that ships actually continue to stay on those routes.
So we actually think we're going to be able to retrofit or get them to retrofit?
We have had great cooperation so far from at least one shipping line and interest in working on this. They've, on our technology demonstration project, they've agreed to provide us a vessel that we can use for at least a year to demonstrate the technology that we're looking at. So I think we, have to continue to have those discussions and talk with additional shipping lines, but we're optimistic.
How does this program coordinate with the shore power requirements?
So shore power is definitely a very hot topic in China right now because a lot of the Chinese ports are installing shore power. They're not having very good usage of shore power. So when we go over there and talk, shore power is one of the questions we're always asked about. This program would be, wouldn't have requirements per se along those lines. We're looking purely at an incentive program, either monetary or if there's some non-monetary approaches we can put in place, like preferential berthing or other things that would be useful for ships, but still encourage them to perhaps install cleaner technology.
Maybe I could add just a little bit to that, Mayor, and that is the utilization rate in at least Yantian and what we've heard throughout China on the shore side is about 1%.
Very, very low.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's extremely low. California's going to have different requirements, but I think when we're looking at the incentive program, we're looking primarily at the transit. And we're looking at the technology aspect associated with that to get the majority of our reductions. And it really is that, if you will, consortium type aspect that's going to provide the incentive. We alone, I don't think we will have much impact. I mean, the ports currently have incentive programs that range anywhere from $500 to $7,500 between the two ports. And that hasn't really been attractive enough yet. So by really trying to team with the ports, with the other cities, and the ship makers, we do think that we can make it more attractive, utilizing some of the technology that they'd be willing to install. And even a 40% reduction on a tier 1 or a tier 2 or even a tier 0 is going to be significant. And when you talk about cost effectiveness, it's going to be by far much more cost effective.
So I think right now that the rule on shore power is 50% of the ships coming in. No,
It's higher.
Tom's saying no. We're going to hear from our.
70, yeah,
It's
69, 70%, yeah.
have to use shore power. So what's the benefit of this program? I mean, once they get in, they may have to hook up anyway, so.
So we have there's significant emissions that we get when they're transiting coming in, when they're maneuvering. So shore power will help us when they're hoteling, and so that we get emission reductions from that. But there's still a whole bunch of other emissions associated with vessel operations within our waters that gets counted for our emission inventory. And so we'll be able to reduce those emissions during those other operational modes.
Okay, so that is like when they're so many miles out, they're going to be cleaner, and so that will affect.
Even with
our air
the
quality.
shore power requirements, my recollection was that in 2023, ship emissions are the largest of the source
And they're
categories.
growing.
So there's an interesting overlap here, because obviously CARB is working on updating their shore power regulations, and they want to go to 100% or close to there, and it doesn't necessarily require zero emission plug-in. It does require like a 90%, or if they're still working on it, it could be a 90% reduction to allow for, say, the bonnet systems. But if the auxiliary engines are already meeting that 90% through retrofits or whatever work that we're doing, that may be an alternative compliance option. And not only would we get the benefit when they're at shore, we would also get the benefit of the emission reductions in transit maneuvering. So how those play together, there is an interesting interplay there that we're following CARB's rule and making sure that our programs acknowledge that.
So if the emissions are significantly reduced, they may not even have to plug in. Is that what you're saying?
The way that the CARB is anticipating the rule, it is not. It is right now. It's like 90% control. So if you can achieve that on your auxiliary engine, which is the only engine running when you're at shore, maybe there's this alternative.
So that might be a benefit.
Yeah.
They don't have to wait to plug in. There might not be enough plug-ins for them to
Might actually-
hear from our
Or they might not be
people out there.
retrofitted, you know.
It might actually be cheaper to retrofit the auxiliary engine than
Right.
just
Than to plug in.
outfit the ship for shore power.
Okay. Then I have another question that's a different. San Joaquin Valley Air District has an indirect source rule that covers new construction. So have we looked at that? I'm sure you've looked at that to see what is that model and how does it work and what might be adopted here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I mean, that is one of the models, it's out there, so it's something that we do want to look at and investigate, and we have been looking at that as well. You know, it is an approach, we think that adopting that kind of model for us, because of the volume of development that we have in our district, would probably be pretty burdensome. It would take a lot of staff resources to be able to deploy. So, you know, again, it's something that we keep in mind, but, you know, I think it's one option of many that we have, and have to kind of balance that with how it would work within our jurisdiction.
Is that sort of a facility cap program or a emission reduction set they have? And if one of the options for meeting it is either adopting mitigation measures or paying a mitigation fee?
It's adopting mitigation measures or paying a mitigation fee, that's right.
So with a rule that we might develop, can we fashion it so it doesn't affect all construction? It may just affect industrial construction?
There's all kinds of ways we could cut it, and that's one of the topics that we have when we discuss with the working group, is what's the appropriate lines to draw.
Okay, all right. Okay, that was all I have. I have a lot of people.
Yeah, we do have a lot of people. I'm going to call those names again. I do have some questions for staff, but Juan Delgado, Sean Martinez, and Laura Schultz should be ready to go here and in the room, and I'll keep announcing in advance so you can get here in the room. If you don't make it, we'll set it aside and wait for you to get here and call you again at some point. But there's two main issues I have with this, and I will probably, you know, wait till after the public comment to go into other things. But the transparency part on the MOU negotiations is very concerning to me. I want to make sure that we don't approach this as the classic regulatory agency decide, announce, defend model, that we're not making decisions with the affected industries without having some public sector involvement. And it's not only just the community members and environmental advocates, but a lot of times there's emission control manufacturers or others who have a real economic interest in what's being decided. And so it would be, I think it would be very good if we start doing the conversations about ports and airports and new and redevelopment publicly as much as possible, and not just meeting with them privately and trying to figure it out without engaging them. So that's the first thing. The second thing, specifically with regard to the ports, my recollection was that we were on a timeline to get to an MOU. Can you, Wayne, what was it?
Well, we want to have the MOU completed by the end of this year, but we want to be able
Was
to
that our
make-
original timeline? By the end of this
That was
year?
that was the original timeline.
Are we on track to do that?
I think we're on track. I think that there's a renewed emphasis. Staff has been working, when I say staff, the port staff and our staff have been working collectively to address that. I want to say that the executive directors of the ports of Los Angeles and the port of Long Beach and I are in discussions, and in fact, just yesterday, we committed to having regular discussions to make sure that the three of us collectively are up to speed on where staff is. And I'm very optimistic, based on our recent discussions, that we'll be able to move forward, include the type of specifications or criteria that we believe are necessary within an MOU to move forward. And I know there was some concern about that, but I think that by having the high-level involvement combined with the existing working groups that we already have to allow for the public participation, we will definitely be on track to meet our schedule.
Okay. Well, if anything slips, you got to let us know right away. On the fleet crediting program, you said it could be like a cap and trade, would be allowed to trade between warehouses?
Well, so the obligation would be, again, we're still fleshing this out, but the concept is warehouses would have a certain obligation to have a certain amount of credits, and then credits would be associated with the different fleets that would service those warehouses. And so the obligation would be on the warehouses, but then they would have to figure out how to meet their obligation by having different fleets visit them. So
Okay.
clean up.
The concern, of course, is that we're dealing with warehouses in some of the most impacted communities that we have. We know that going in. what we want to make sure that we don't do is exacerbate or create environmental justice problems where they already exist, or don't exist but may exist, and allowing for trading between warehouses may actually do that. And I think we're all aware of that. We need to go into this with our eyes wide open, that we don't make the problem worse than it already is by allowing for some facilities that are not operating properly to trade with other facilities and continue to not operate as clean as they can. Anyway, we can get into gory details of this at some other point. We have 45 minutes left, and we're going to have to go pretty quickly. So is Juan Delgado ready to?
He's not.
Okay.
Dr. Lou?
Is he here?
He'll be here.
Oh, Dr. Parker.
Parker's here, okay.
We've got until public comment. We have, I believe, 24 cards, and just enough time to get to them if everyone speaks 2 minutes or less.
We also may have.
Okay, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay. That time,
Right.
a handful of people.
Is Juan going to be here?
He'll be here.
Okay. All right, Sean Martinez, that's you? Great, thank you.
Right here?
You have 2
Yeah.
minutes.
All right. Is there a microphone or just?
You're on.
Okay.
It's right there.
Hi, everyone. My name's Sean Martinez with the Teamsters Union. We represent tens of thousands of workers in the goods movement industry, warehouse workers, as well as other industries. Just here, I'm kind of new to this, my first meeting. Not here to advocate for any specific policy quite yet. We're still trying to get caught up to speed, but here to just make the case that what this body is doing is so important because this industry needs to be regulated. It's run by some of the largest, most wealthy corporations in the world, and our communities are being impacted. So we have some of the worst air quality in the nation, in the Inland Empire, and we have some of the worst job quality. These warehouses, in terms of economic development, often underdevelop our communities by lowering standards in an industry that's very impactful to the overall economy. So, we're here with Sierra Club and CCAJ that actually asked us to come and speak to these issues. We're working very closely with them about how to hold this industry accountable more generally. But what you all are doing here is so important. Our members work in warehouses. Our members work for public agencies, cities, and the counties in the region. And, workers are part of the community. Obviously, we want more jobs, we want economic development, but we need clean air and healthy and safe communities to live in and thrive in. So we look forward to participating more in the future, but just wanted to make our voice heard and again, encourage you guys and just let you know that what you're doing is so important because this is a regional issue and it's hard to regulate and look at things city by city, especially in the Inland Empire where there's so many cities and so many jurisdictions. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We have Laura Schultz, followed by Yazi Kazvezadi, I guess it is, and Miguel Rivera. So Laura, then Yazi, then Miguel.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before this group of people. My name is Laura Schultz. I'm a retired county employee from San Bernardino County. The last 3 to 5 years, I saw an increase of applications from the county residents. These residents worked in those warehouses. Some of them had injuries, the low pay. So we're supplementing that income. We're supplementing those insurances for these warehouses. I'm also a resident of Urupa Valley. I have seen an increase of warehouses in my area. These warehouses bring in lots of trucks, lots of pollution. So I'm encouraging this group to really look at what we're doing as far as regulations. Warehouses and those operators of those facilities should be held accountable to provide community benefits for their communities. They are a member of a community. They're asking to come into our community. We are not asking them to come into our community. They're asking us. As that, maybe it's time that we change the warehouse business model to hold these operators accountable, to have them require those trucking firms to have low emission vehicles, to require them to provide good paying jobs. Again, I stated that I live in Urupa Valley. Go back how many years ago, when a board similar to this approved the Stringfellow acid pits? Look at the environmental and the health issues that subsequented from that decision. When we put corporate profits above community, above our environment, above those residents that you guys are asked to basically protect. Stringfellow acid pits is still an ongoing problem in the Urupa Valley. Please, take some heed with these regulations.
Thank you, Laura, for your comments. We have Yazi, and then Miguel Rivera, and then Hannah Velez.
I'm sorry, my name's Juan Delgado.
Oh, Juan, yeah, go ahead. You can, go ahead. Jump on in.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm late. I missed part of it, heard it in the auditorium. I just wanted to give some of my perspective on growing up in the Inland Empire and also working in the Inland Empire for a logistics company, distribution company.
I'm sorry, can you say your name, please?
Juan Delgado.
Thank you.
And so I grew up in the Inland Empire, and I've seen the changes that have come about, and there has been quite a bit of development. Unfortunately, I don't believe it's the right kind of development in our communities. We're getting a lot of warehouses and a lot of distribution centers, and on the onset it looks like, oh, they're providing jobs, but they're not good jobs. They're not viable jobs. One of the concerns that I have is I worked for a company that was a distribution center, and that company, Stater Brothers Distribution, actually, Jack Brown, when he was alive, took concern about the community and also about what was going on with the quality of life in the communities. One of the things he was doing while he was alive was he was trying to regulate the trucks that came in, outside carriers that came into the warehouse, as far as like idling, the refrigerated units, certain things that they couldn't do so that they wouldn't be constantly running their engines. The other thing he was doing was changing the trucks that they used to clean air to natural gas, which is something that it's hopefully coming in the future to be a little bit better for our communities. But one of the concerns that one of the biggest concerns I have is I grew up here. I'm probably going to live here for the rest of my life, and let alone the traffic that these warehouses are the traffic there. It's just awful now. But the quality of air is gotten worse every year. After the last rain a couple weeks ago, we were driving back from LA, and we were coming off the 210. And as we were driving, I could actually see the mountains being green, and I hadn't seen that for the longest time. So one of the things that I would like to work with you, and anything I can do to contribute and be a part of this, is to find ways to get back to what we used to have in this community and be proud of what the Inland Empire was.
Thank you, Juan. We're going to have to be strict about the 2 minutes, or else we'll never get through it. But thank you for your comments. They were green and white, the mountains. Wasn't it wonderful?
Yes.
Yazi, Miguel, and Hannah, in that order.
Good morning, everybody.
The last name I butchered. What
It's
is
okay. It's Kaveh-Zadeh.
I never get it right.
It's
Sorry
all
about that.
good. It's unique. It's me. Thank you so much for everybody's time, and I appreciate all the speakers who went before me. I've been working with staff on this rule, attending working group meetings. I'm an organizing representative with the Sierra Club. I'm an alumni of UC Riverside. And one of the issues that's gotten me passionate about this is our youth. And you'll see today are a couple of members that have been engaged in the industry in one way or another. Their families work in it. Their health is affected by it, especially in the goods movement facility part of this rule. But however, the whole rule is important to us, and we see it as a way to transition into a future towards electrifications and zero emissions. And we're here to stand strong for a rule that actually caps emissions and doesn't honor a system that pays to pollute anymore, because we want a different future, and California is already leading that way. So I just want to amplify those voices, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Yazi. I have Miguel Rivera, Hannah Velez, and then next on the list is Ricardo Caballero.
Hi, y'all. I'm Miguel Rivera. I live in Muscoy, and I also sit on the AB 617 committee for San Bernardino and Muscoy. I'm here to emphasize the option of strong facility caps, not just paying to pollute. Although there's some overlap with AB 617 issues, this issue needs to be full regulatory attention, because it can provide a future towards cleaner air. Electrification is what our region needs for a green economy and bold solutions in our backyards for cleaner air. I urge the South Coast the AQMD. To uphold its commitment to protect our air quality and health by creating strong indirect source rule, we need regulations and rules that actually limit emissions and pollute, not just credits by paying to pollute by for big industry, real limits on emissions. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. Okay, Hannah, Ricardo, Caballero, and then Rebecca Hernandez after Ricardo. Is Hannah here? Hi.
Hello. Oh, so there's no mic?
It's on.
Right. Hello. Hello, committee. My name is Hannah Velez, and I live in the city of Paris. Last month, I came on behalf of the Sierra Club to talk about potential rules and regulations that should be put in place to reduce emissions. The Inland Empire is currently experiencing an increase in warehouse, new development, and polluting rail yards. These indirect sources are what put Southern California on the map for one of the worst air pollution in the world. In 2018, April 8th, the Lung Association released a study showing air pollution data over a 3-year period from 2014 to 2016 and calculated a weighted national average of days the ozone and particles exceeded federal safety levels. For the second year in a row, Los Angeles, Riverside, Ventura, San Bernardino, and Orange County recorded the nation's largest number of unhealthy days for ozone, caustic and lung-damaging gases that cause shortness of breath and in long-term associated with asthma, COPD, and lung cancer. Last time I was here, I touched upon my allergies and my asthma, and I've been compelled this time to share a story of a friend of mine. I'm going to keep her name anonymous if that's okay. She's probably missed more days of school in a month than I have in my entire high school experience. She has to sleep with 3 pillows on her back because she can't breathe if she lays down. And she regularly has to regulate everything that she does because if not, she can't breathe. For the past 50 years, the Inland Empire residents have been breathing air that could endanger their health. I urge the South Coast Air Quality Management District Governing Board to uphold this commitment to protect our air quality and health by creating a strong indirect source rule. We need to get these rules to have more resources that could make a notable difference in my community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Hannah. Ricardo, then Rebecca Hernandez, then Ashley Alvarado.
Good morning. My name is Ricardo Caballero, and I am 17 years old, and I currently live in Paris, California. I live in an area in which it feels like there is a warehouse in every single corner. Some may think that these warehouses are positively impacting us because they are creating new job opportunities, but that is a wrong assessment. Many of the jobs provide barely livable wages and contribute to air pollution. This pollution is impacting our health. This pollution is impacting our health. Gas and diesel trucks don't just stay in one place, they travel across our Inland Empire. Breathing polluted air puts you at a higher risk for asthma and other respiratory diseases. Diesel trucks are coming out of warehouses near houses and schools, which affects children and people living even miles away. In my experience, I have a neighbor that owns his own truck, and every time that truck is parked in their front yard, I get the worst smell ever. I can 100% say that this smell makes me not even want to step outside, not even to get the mail. So today I encourage you all to not forget about us in the Inland Empire and that we need a strong indirect source rule and study that looks at our health. Strong rules like facility caps can reduce emissions on the ground, and I believe that the Air District does not have enough evidence to say that they are implementable. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Rebecca, then Ashley Alvarado, then Ricardo Hernandez.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Hernandez, and I currently live in the city of Paris. I'm here today because I would like to make a difference in my community and for clean air and a sustainable future. Currently, there are more than 10 warehouses in a 10-mile radius near my home. This does not include the 2 that are being built right across the street from my home. These warehouses, most of these facilities are being operated 24/7, which is causing much more pollution in the air. These warehouses are affecting the health of many Paris residents, such as allergies, bronchitis, migraine, sickness, and asthma. Most of my family, they're currently suffering from allergies and coughs we simply cannot get rid of. This polluted air is making us sick. We cannot and will not tolerate trucks and warehouses that pollute near our homes, schools, and jobs. A change that needs to happen in our community must start today, a change that could be possible by proper funding and support. The indirect source rule that caps emission could be the change that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have Ashley Alvarado, Ricardo Hernandez, then Adam Wedding.
Hi, my name is Ashley Alvarado, and I will be sharing on behalf of Alejandro Ojeda, who couldn't be here today due to family reasons. But however, he was unable, This just goes to show how committed he is. Growing up, he had never really known the effects of poor air quality. He would constantly see large trucks and huge factories as he drove around the city, and I see them every day in the Paris and Moreno Valley area where I live. But he didn't know that these could actually harm people. Recently, a couple of family members of his have experienced trouble breathing and their lungs aren't functioning properly. Their doctors believe that it is because of the air they took in while working in factories and living near them. I understand that it might be too late to prevent their conditions from getting worse. But that does not mean that we stop here. We are the next generation. We deserve to have a say on politics that will affect our everyday lives. Cleaner air can prevent the conditions that his family members have experienced from happening to people like him and I. With your help, we can prevent this altogether. We must no longer listen to companies and their money, but instead to the next generation. In the end, they won't be the ones experiencing health problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Ricardo Hernandez, Adam Wedding, and Diana Olivia Sierra.
Good morning. My name is Ricardo Hernandez, and I live in the city of Paris. I'm here because our community should have access to zero emissions and transportation electrification investments for clean air and sustainable future, with indirect source rule through rules to reduce emissions, not credits to pollution. This is my second time being here on behalf of the Sierra Club, advocating for an indirect source rule. The last time I came, I was with 4 of my peers. I come to you now with more, and each day that our air is poisoned, our numbers grow, because the youth are speaking. All I ask is that you listen to our voice. I'm not being paid to be here with you all today. I'm here to represent my peers. I'm here to not only represent my peers, but my community, my neighbors, and my family. I'm here representing the working families that are at this time working to pay the bills and put food on the table. Just because they are not here does not mean that their growing concern for their children's health is not real. I'm not here to criticize or scold any of you, but to inspire you to fight for our future, my future. I never said that the proposal was going to be easy, but nothing really is. But I ask you all to not quit just because the road gets hard. If that was the case, I would not be here with you all today. If I quit every time things got rough, I would not be a part of so many clubs and organizations. I am currently involved in various positions, from National Honor Society to California Scholarship Federation, Young Medical Scholars, Sierra Club, and the list goes on. All these clubs and organizations that I am a part of have one thing in common, and that is in some way, shape, or form to help my community. As a 17-year-old, barely spreading my wings, I'm afraid and appalled that my future is slowly being poisoned, and there's no one doing anything to save it. We are ignoring and putting this epidemic aside because we prioritize money and profit over health. Our health should not be categorized as a privilege or a luxury, but as a basic human right. This should not be a left or right discussion, but a moral one. Working families in my communities and those in the Inland Empire are suffering from the lack of regulations and rules preventing companies from polluting. I just want to say that you are looking at the future, and I'm here and I'm watching, and I'm continuing to fight for my peers in my community for strong solutions for a healthier environment. Thank you.
Ricardo. Okay, I have Adam Wedding, Diana Olivia Sierra, and Miguel Ramirez.
Hello, my name is Adam Wedding. I am the chair of the Social and Environmental Justice Committee at the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside. And I'm here to share a little bit of my faith with you all. As Unitarian Universalists, we have 7 principles, and one of those principles, the 7th one, is that we affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we're all a part. And the reason for that is that we believe, as people of faith, that this earth that we live on is a gift given to us by the Spirit of life, the energy that has created us. And it is something that we have received from our ancestors and that we will pass on to our children. And I think it's really great to have the opportunity to hear the voice of these young people talk about how this affects them. It's really important for us to think about the society that we're leaving these kids. Having a strong indirect source rule will leave this world in a situation where we have a lot less breathing issues. Breathing problems are very prevalent within the Inland Empire. The smog issue in the Inland Empire is horrible. And it's more than just an economic issue. This is a moral issue about how we're leaving our society for our children and their children. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Diana, Miguel Ramirez, and Carmen Chim.
Hi, my name is Diana. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for letting me speak. So you guys have heard a few of our stories, a few of our statistics. We know that there's a problem directly correlated to warehouse emissions. And the problem is we shouldn't let that shape our lives, right? This is an opportunity to take something back. Our businesses, what makes us on the map, what makes us connected to the rest of the world, what gives us our economy. This is an opportunity to take that back and help and make that benefit ourselves rather than us being on the bad end of all of this, right? I'm here to tell you a story, my story. So I've been an athlete my entire life. I was a ballerina, a swimmer, a water polo player, and I really like to run outside. And so when I graduated high school, I had plans of joining the Army and becoming a medic. But unfortunately, I got asthma the summer that I graduated. And so, like I'm sure you know, you can't join the Army with asthma. So, yeah, I didn't expect to get asthma. I didn't expect it to take that toll on my life decision, right? I was paying for something that I didn't do myself, and so I had to change my course. I still want to be a surgeon, right? But that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about today, that so many lives are impacted by this issue and not in a positive way. And I feel like there's a lot of potential for us to change that and make it work for us rather than the other way around. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Diana. Miguel Ramirez, Carmen Chim, and Jonas Fernandez.
Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Ramirez. I go to school in UC Riverside and live in Riverside. And I'm sure if you've been in the area, know that the air in Riverside and that entire region is very polluted. Taking summer courses at UC Riverside, it's very difficult because just the walk between my apartment and my campus, the air is so polluted, the air is so dirty, they don't even recommend going outside during days of the summer, right? And I think that we are in a period of time where you all can take steps to take our nation, our region, to like a healthier, cleaner, and kind of try to pursue a more meaningful future for all of us. My generation is looking at you all for audacity, it's looking at you all for leadership, it's looking at you all for, being able to take that next step to make sure that people like me, people like all these young people that are here can live a healthier life in a place where the air is cleaner. I believe that everyone has the right to clean air. Everyone has the right to clean water. Everyone has the right to live in a healthy environment. And it's up to people like y'all and these privileged positions that can guarantee that people like me and people like everyone in Riverside area actually grow up living a healthier life, actually grow up thinking that a healthier and more meaningful future is possible. So we're looking at you all for that step of leadership because I think it's possible. One thing that living in Riverside I've noticed affects all of us the most is kind of what Diana brought up, is the health issue. The emissions from traffic really contaminate the Inland Empire region and leaves a huge toll in health. People in Riverside have huge rates of asthma and diseases related to air pollution. And that shouldn't be the case, right? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Miguel. Carmen Chim, Jonas Fernandez, and Paula Venegas.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Carmen Chim. I am a student at UC Riverside, and I actually live in Riverside right now, but I'm actually originally from the Bay Area. And in the Bay Area, because of the fires, we've had really, really bad air quality. There are reports from Yale University saying that it's 60 times above the safe limit. That's unbelievable. Like, I wouldn't even believe, like 10 times, but 60 times. And furthermore, my friends, my family, my relatives, they all have to go through it. They have to go to work, go to school. Thankfully my brother's school was canceled, but UC Berkeley wasn't. And also my dad's out to work. One of my former teachers like took a picture and posted on Facebook of the sky, and he said you could see the sun without you could see it without protection whatsoever. It just blocked all the dangerous rays, and this is devastating. Like, this is my family, the people I care about. So we need to make sure that climate change is stopped, is slowed down, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Carmen. Jonas Fernandez, Paula Venegas, and Elisa Eifler.
The mic's on.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right. Hello, South Coast AQMD. My name is Jonas Fernandez, and I am from the Sierra Club in the Inland Empire. I am one of the many people affected by diesel emissions from warehouses that strongly impact this region. I live in the city of Loma Linda, and in the street of Tippecanoe is where many trucks pass by and release a ton of emissions that I could even hear them pass by every night in front of my home. These emissions, as you have known, have increased health-related issues from its known effects. I'd strongly suggest that you should implement a strong indirect source rule, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Paula Venegas, Elisa Eifler, and Diana Contreras.
Paula's not here.
Paula's not here. Will she be here later?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, is Elisa here?
Yes.
Great. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Elise Eifler. I'm a student at the University of Redlands and president of Students for Environmental Action and here with the Sierra Club. I'm originally from the Bay Area, but since coming down to the Inland Empire, I've personally felt a significant difference in my lung capacity. And most of my friends who are from the IE have some sort of respiratory ailment or asthma. And as I'm sure you know, 15 deaths occur every day due to respiratory problems in just the IE alone. And I want to thank you for allowing us to come here and speak today and give community input at this meeting and talking about the indirect source rule. I think that one thing that should be thought about is getting zero emissions trucks. You all have like a lot of power within the AQMD and working towards enforcing zero emissions trucks to be going through these spaces that are causing a lot of these respiratory ailments and air pollution and issues in the IE and beyond. I think that we are, as California and as the AQMD, you have a lot of power, and we have a lot of power as an economy to start to make a shift towards zero emissions semis and these big trucks that are causing this pollution. And so I recommend starting to enforce having zero emissions trucks. Tesla and Nikola have already released zero emissions trucks. So it's something that we can start to enforce. And that's what I recommend as being part of the indirect source rule to start to alleviate a lot of these respiratory ailments and injustices that are happening in the IE and the South Coast area. Thank you.
Diana Contreras, Andrea Vindan, I can't pronounce it, can't read it right. Vida Ure, I think it is, and Carlo De La Cruz.
Good morning, members. My name is Diana, and I live in the city of Rancho Cucamonga. And I'm here to emphasize what the earlier speakers have said. We no longer want warehouses in the Inland Empire because these warehouses have negatively impacted our health and also our air quality. So I'm just here to urge the South Coast Air Quality Management Board to support the source rule. And as a member of the Air Quality Management Board, you guys have a lot of influence and a position to help these communities and improve their lives and their health, because a lot of members are not here because they don't have transportation. So what about them? They're not here to talk about their stories. So do consider the lives that are being impacted by the decision you guys decide today, tomorrow, and until you have this position. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Diana. Did Andrea make it in yet?
Yes.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
I know you. I live there. So wait, I know that name.
It's okay. It's okay. Andrea Vidaurre, our future. Huh?
How do you say your last name?
Vidaurre.
Vidaurre.
Perfect. Yeah, there you go. You just have to hear it once, I think. It's hard to read. It's okay.
Maybe more than once.
It's okay, Dr.
Thank you, Andrea.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea. I am with the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. We're in the Inland Empire. I'm thankful for the hard work thus far from the staff and working with us and continuing to be open about warehouses in particular. I'm thankful for the direction of this board. To begin an ISR, it goes beyond saying how necessary this rule really is and how urgent it continues to be for all of us, especially the communities that have been targeted and are breathing in 40% more pollution than others. I think that's what the latest statistic just came out last week, right? We know that this crisis is escalating and that there's no room for measures that stall change or include a mechanism that makes us wait any longer for pollution or emissions reductions. We need caps, bottom line. To set the stage, I'm here today for my baby niece. She's my first niece, just as you all know, just as I know you all are here for people like her, babies like her. My little baby niece is growing up in these communities that we have the power to change. And if we choose a rule that makes us wait and lets them figure it out, instead of direct change, my baby niece will be like the many other children that have been studied in the region that ended up with reduced lung capacity. Coming from the communities that make same-day delivery possible and instant goods possible for this part of the entire country, we know that voluntary measures and incentives have not been enough, and we know that they're not protecting us completely. We need those responsible for heading us into the direction of non-attainment and those responsible for generations of children with asthma to internalize the costs for the way they profit. Our communities have internalized a bottom line with their literal lives. And you heard how it's stunting the youth at thinking big because of how health is a risk for them. We won't be responsible. We aren't responsible for the bad land use. We won't be responsible if a 3.5 million square foot warehouse goes in the middle of a community where 2,000 trucks are predicted to go a week. But we will be responsible and complicit if we didn't take the chance to regulate these warehouses appropriately with a cap. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I have Carlo De La Cruz, Heather Tomley, and Thomas Yellen.
So good morning, members of the committee and Chair Burke. I want to just thank you all for being so patient and listening to all the members of the community. This is clearly an important issue for many members, and in fact, we would have more folks here today if it weren't for obligations like school. I just want to point your attention to the letter that the Sierra Club, CCAJ, Earth Justice, and many organizations signed on to. We thank staff for being so willing to engage with us through this entire process, and we look forward to continuing to work with staff. I want to raise just a few comments and themes I think we see today. First off, I think the youth really deserve, and I don't want to say youth in some kind of separate way, but they really deserve our respect and admiration, because I think we're seeing the new generation of enthusiasm and also the vision to see a world that we don't live in today, a world that is different. And unfortunately, as a SoCal resident, as an Angelino born and raised, I grew up with asthma. My mom grew up with asthma, and we thought that this paradigm of trucks and freeways was constant. I want to point you to the youth because I think it shows that a new future is possible only if we have the courage to envision it. The Union of Concerned Scientists just released a report that California pollution is so terrible in certain regards that it actually it is environmental racism. Black households and Latino households experience 40% more air pollution than white households on average in the entire state. And we know that that's because the pollution is concentrated in the communities. As we heard earlier today from the staff presentation, many of these warehouses are concentrated in the IE. And so we've heard many of the names today with the backgrounds of the families that reflect that economic and that environmental racism. Lastly, I want to say that many of the youth are speaking here today because their parents are either unable to be here because of their jobs or because of their health conditions. And the youth themselves still woke up earlier than 6 a.m. just to be here by 9 a.m. Some of them may not even do that for their own classes or tests. I know I did it when I was a student. So I want to thank you all, and I also want to thank members of the audience for being so respectful of the speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. Heather Tomley, Thomas Yelenik, and then Erica Flores. We're getting to the end, folks. 4 more.
Good morning. I'm Heather Tumley. I'm with the Port of Long Beach. And I just wanted to make a couple comments. First and foremost, I wanted to make the comment that the 2 ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles are absolutely committed to implementing our 2017 Clean Air Action Plan. We have a lot of different efforts that have been underway since that plan was adopted, and we're working aggressively towards implementing all of the strategies, in particular on trucks, with vessels, with cargo handling equipment. We established some very aggressive goals. We have a lot of work that's underway, and we're continuing to move forward on the path as we laid out in the Clean Air Action Plan. Also related to that, we have been working very closely with the AQMD staff. We've scheduled recurring meetings. We meet every 3 weeks to talk about the progress on the MOU. We also just recently participated in the first technical working group to start working through some of the emissions details and the forecasting. And so we're committed to continue with that effort. Executive Director Nastri also mentioned that we had a meeting just recently with our executive directors. And so there is that high level commitment to making this process work as well. So we're continuing to participate in this process. We know that there's a lot of challenges, but I think that we're working through those, and we're on the path to be able to put an MOU in place that can be of mutual benefit for both of our agencies. So thank you very much.
Before the end of the year. Thank you, Heather. Thomas Jelinek, Erica Flores, and last but not least, Veronica Alvarado. Thomas, you're up.
Thank you. Good morning, board members. Thomas Jelinek, representing PMSA. I'm here to talk about the ISRs and the MOU you guys are going to be developing with the 2 ports. I think it's important to remember what a significant challenge we're all facing in terms of defining SIP creditable emission benefits attributable to the Clean Air Action Plan programs, in particular the Clean Trucks program. It's easy to mischaracterize the Clean Trucks program, and in fact on slide 16 of the presentation, it represents that the Clean Trucks program will result in turnover of the existing fleet. That's not correct. The Clean Trucks program is about local emission reductions in the port. The trucks that currently call the port and will eventually be banned will still be able to continue serving other truck-related uses throughout the region. So there is a real question about what is SIP credible out of the Clean Trucks program. In fact, Joe, Matt, you probably remember we've had this discussion as part of the Port of Los Angeles's Sustainable Supply Chain Committee. And there is a real question of whether there are any SIP credible emission reductions that can be attributed here. Under the original Clean Trucks program, where we got real emission reduction, we got real local benefits for the community as a result of turning over the fleet. Those happened in the vicinity of the port. But in terms of the regional benefit came through programs like Prop 1B and Carl Moyer that resulted in the scrappage of those trucks. Right now, we don't have the means identified to scrap trucks. That is how we will get to cleaner regional air. And so while the Clean Trucks program may provide local benefit, as it has before, it is unclear that what we will find in terms of SIP creditable. And that's something we will have to resolve before the ports and AQMD can enter into an MOU on something like this.
Thank you, Thomas, for your comments. Erica Flores, and then Veronica Alvarado.
Hi, good morning.
You're not speaking that
Oh, okay. I have a loud voice, so we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
I'm an organizer. Good morning. My name is Erica Flores. I'm here on behalf of the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. I also am a proud resident of the city of San Bernardino, where I reside, very close to the BNSF rail yard. And I'm also a committee member with the AB 617 group that we have right now, the steering committee. So yes, I'm here also to promote and support and encourage you to implement and for us to get to a goal of having a strong ISR rule, which is strongly needed. I don't know if any of you have ever lived near a rail yard or a warehouse, so I'm going to walk you through what it's like a little bit on a daily basis. I'm walking distance from the rail yard. There's noise pollution, but most importantly, truck pollution. And this is a nuisance. This has truly impacted the livelihood, our daily livelihood from the residents, which have been targeted. we are targeted. We are not a vulnerable community, we're a targeted community by the industry. An industry that is not being regulated thus far, and that continues to, I'll call it what it is, kill our residents, kill our community members. What we need is a strong ISR rule that truly caps emissions. Right now, diesel truck pollution, I think you've heard it from various of my colleagues, the data that recently came out, the pollution exposure that we are experiencing on the ground. The data supports what I just said. We have a working class that wanted to be here today, could not make it because many of them actually do work in these warehouses. There's an influx of warehouses that have been coming in also into various of the communities, particularly in the county of San Bernardino. There are not as strong regulations either over these warehouses, but most importantly, over the trucks that these warehouses are attracting. I want to tap and go back into, is that it?
Yep, you've run out of time.
One last thing, one thing that I really want to urge you to, that we need is a working group. We have not met with community residents to discuss the rail yards. Please, I urge you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Veronica Alvarado, you're the last of our commenters.
So first, I always get nervous before I speak, so bear with me. But my name is Veronica Alvarado. I'm with the Warehouse Worker Resource Center. I've been working with this community for the past 10 years. We specifically work with workers that are non-represented, working inside of these warehouses. As you guys know, the heat out here is ridiculous. Over these last couple of years, as our industry has continued to expand, the heat is becoming even worse. I want you guys to imagine, if you can, outside of your suits and in a regular labor-focused job, working inside of these warehouses where the temperature outside is 110 degrees, there is no insulation inside of these warehouses, and the temperature inside is over 120 degrees. I don't know if you can imagine working under these conditions. As a result of this, we are now in the process of creating the first ever indoor heat rule, because this is something that wasn't in existence before, which is ridiculous. The other thing that I want you guys to think about as you're creating this ISR is that this is about protecting our community. And our community doesn't only lie with the people that live in these communities. The workers working inside of these warehouses are part of the community, and we need to do better by them, and we need to protect them. You know, being constantly exposed to the diesel and to the emissions, I have entire warehouses where we work with, that workers tell us, you know, we've created systems to not breathe in the fumes after they back up into the warehouse. Because we feel dizzy, we actually fall on the ground, we faint, and this burden is now placed onto the workers. It's the burden of the workers to make sure that they can prove that the impact that they're receiving was as a result of the working conditions, which is ridiculous. And I know my time is running out, but one thing that is really important is that earlier I heard the lady say that a lot of these warehouses don't own the fleets, but actually some of the fleets of the beneficial cargo owners do own the fleets. And like in the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, that burden was transferred onto the workers, to the owner-operators, which then went on and say, don't you want to be your own entrepreneur? Don't you want to own your own truck? So that the big box retailers who own the fleets actually pass on the burden onto the workers.
Mr. Chair, you are going to have to wrap up. So thank you for your comments.
But we need to do better and protect our workers, right?
That's what we're here to do. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public comment. We have 2 minutes to finish this committee meeting, unfortunately, at this point. Any more comments? I turn it over to Dr. Parker here in the last 2 minutes to assume his mantle as chair.
Okay. I would urge our staff to do something, which I was listening very attentively to all of the speakers. One of the things that we have constantly wrestled with in our agency is that what is our responsibility as well as that of our legal challenges that we have. We don't control a lot of the things themselves that go on the inside of the warehouses relative to the people. We control those things that come into the air, or the potential itself of coming to the air. That is even a question itself that is roaming now? Is that whether or not it's not in the air, do we still have something to do with it that people are threatening to put into the air? That being said, our then legal responsibilities are somewhat limited to the extent itself that we can say. I heard someone say, well, people are coming in and buying the right itself to pollute. Well, if someone has to put up monies in order to not meet a certain standard, those dollars then themselves are used to get reductions from other areas. If they don't want to take the dollars and put into their own fleets to make them more friendly, air friendly, that is, then we're going to take those dollars and give it to someone else. But it still does not relieve them of that responsibility. They have to continue to pay those dollars on an ongoing basis, not a one-time basis. And I think that's something that we as an agency have to make sure that the public understands what our responsibilities themselves are, and not thinking that we have the rights itself to go in and set working standards, et cetera, within certain confines, et cetera. Certainly we are constantly saying that we should have trucks themselves that are zero emissions down to the point of financing them. Paul Moyer and those kind of programs are the ones that we have. But it's important that we ourselves let the public know as we have our community meetings what our legal responsibilities themselves are and what we can and cannot do, and to support us in those particular areas and not in the areas, et cetera, that we are trying to make law that expanding our responsibilities, our legal issues, et cetera. And I understand and I agree with 99% of most of the things that I've heard people say. But to the extent itself of what we have the responsibility to do, or the legal responsibility, is something that I think we should take very, seriously, in making sure that the people that we're talking to really do understand what it is that we are really attempting to do. I know our time is running out. I saw Mrs. Mitchell had her hand up, wanted to make a comment. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments. One is that as we continue to develop these rules, I would like to see, and maybe my colleagues would like to see, some outline of what is SIP creditable. I think Mr. Jelinek raised an interesting point. So if we're going to do a rule, we want to make sure that there's some value in it for reaching our requirements under the AQMP. The other thing I want to mention is that CARB will take up a rule this next week on airport shuttles and bringing them to zero emission by 2035. So that's out there, and we can perhaps use that as we're talking about, I'm sure you know this, I'm talking about an MOU with the airports. Also want to disclose that within the last couple of months, I did meet with the ports, with Heather, with Rick Cameron, with Chris Cannon, with a lot of the people from the ports to talk about what was happening here with the indirect source rule and the fact that you guys are working together on an MOU. So just want to disclose that that I had met with them. That's it.
If I might, Mr. Chair, going along that line, do we have targeted goals that we're looking for in terms of emission reductions for each of the areas that we're working in?
We don't have specific targeted goals. It's something that we're working out in the process to see what's feasible, what's doable, but there aren't.
That would be very helpful also.
Okay.
I would just say that I would encourage staff when it comes to the warehouses and the ports to do what it can to identify which cargo owners are using which trucks and contracting with which trucks for those things. I want to know the cargo owners who are using the cleanest fleets and who are using the dirtiest fleets, because I think that's important information that in and of itself can lead to the use of cleaner trucks in our region. So if you can get that data through this process, I think it'd be very helpful.
Well, the other thing, when you order from Amazon, they don't show up in semis, they show up in
right,
whatever
so
trucks
the last
are
mile.
available.
Yeah. They contract with that too. A lot of those are, contracted.
Well, one of the things that I don't know if it was discussed prior to my coming, and I apologize to everyone. I had a dental surgery this morning at 7 o'clock that I've been going through for the last 2 years, so that's why I was a little late. I thought I would be finished by 9, but when you have 5 surgeons looking over you, they all want to talk to each other, so it made me a little bit late. But I think that one of the things that we've been talking about is how many trucks are going to be coming in and out of the warehouses, and to what extent do we need to have the controls of those trucks from the owners of the warehousing standpoint of view, not necessarily the truckers, because I think it's been already determined that we don't have the right itself to tell the trucks, what they can do, but we can tell the warehousing when they come in, what kind of trucks and what kind of pollution itself that would come out. So that's the kind of thing that I think that we'll let the public know that that's what we are really attempting to do, and that we're not out trying to tell a trucker, you got to get rid of this truck right now. We try to incentivize them by saying we're going to help you and give you money in order to get rid of that old diesel burning truck and get a cleaner fuel burning truck. I think that will help a lot and go a long ways to people recognizing that we are really trying to do what we can with what we've got, and those resources themselves should be there. But that being said, I think this was a very helpful meeting and certainly shows that people are very interested. They came out today and spoke, and it was an update, and I thank the staff for the work that they put into this. Any other comments from any of my colleagues? Anybody else that have any other comments from there at CC8?
We have items 3 and 4 are just written reports, and then other business and public comment.
Okay. So any further public comments from anyone?
No, don't see.
Hearing none, then we will adjourn our meeting, and thank everyone for coming out, and our next meeting is scheduled for March 15th, 2019. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Yeah, I know, I don't like it at all.